So a lot of my friends, and I'm sure other people too, have asked about what I do in my sketchnoting ADHD classes. And so I thought I'd take this opportunity to go over one of my most requested classes, which is the ADHD systems versus procedures. I'm teaching that one this week. So I thought I'd show you guys kind of like what it is that I do to give you some idea. So hang on one second. Let me share my screen. Excuse me. Went for a run this morning, so my throat is a little raw from breathing in that cold air. Okay, so this is kind of what it would look like. I give the kids a warm-up screen, but eventually we get into the actual meat of the class, and this is the one that we're doing today. So ADHD systems versus procedures. So they would start off today by drawing themselves as a video game character or a board game character, right? So we don't want to limit things for them as far as like the class goes. They don't necessarily need to have it be attached to social media or anything like that or play video games. The whole idea is that it's accessible for everyone, right? So picture yourself as a video game or board game character. And I always draw with the kids. So when I think of this, I think of like the little Mii's from Nintendo Wii. So I'm going to draw myself as a little Mii. There's my little Mii. They float above their feet. They don't actually seem to have feet. So I'm just going to do that. All right. So there's my little Mii, right? And the reason that we're looking at it this way is one, the kids love drawing themselves as like, different characters from either cartoons or board games or video games or what have you. But also it's a really good way for them to kind of disconnect their selves and their identities from their brains, because we're going to be talking about their brains. And that's something that I iterate to them over and over again, is that if you just came to my class for tips and tricks, you could go and watch that on YouTube. Like you could read a book, you could use my doodle workbook, right? I published a doodle workbook. Like you could do those things. But if you're in class with me, it's important for us to be able to think about our brains and talk about our brains. And then if the tips and tricks also work as well, then you can adjust them as necessary. And that's exactly what we're going to be talking about in class today. So we're going to start off by having them draw themselves as a video game character. I'll usually give them like 3 or 4 minutes to do that. And then we'll move on into the next lesson, which is where we take this abstract idea of our minds and we talk about them in terms of some sort of a game, right? Whether it's a board game or a video game. So I would say, okay, so for the next box, I want you to draw your environment or your surroundings in your game world, whatever your game world is, right? So I always think of like the Mario Brothers, and I don't know which one it is. I want to say it was like Super Mario Brothers 3 or 4. It was the one that everyone hated. It had like the weird floating islands, and there were tons of underwater boards, and it had this like weird hippo thing. I loved it. I thought it was a really good game, but no one else really seemed to like it. But that's what I think of when I do this. And like I said, I draw this with the kids as we are doing this together. We're talking and we're drawing. And I would explain to them that when we talk about ADHD, it is sometimes helpful for us to understand the way that we can maneuver with our brains, right? Our non-systems based brain in a systems based world, by thinking about our brains as being in this type of environment, this game environment, right? And not necessarily that we're going to gamify everything, but it helps us to kind of look at our environment so that it's not as personal, and we can say, okay, this isn't about me being a failure or being unable to complete tasks that everybody else seems to be able to complete. This is about me, and this is about being inside this game self, right? So I'm going to doodle myself. Environment and surroundings are altered to accommodate. So if we're talking about our environment, here's me. And I'm going to say that my environment in this game-based world, on this little floating thing, whoops. And like I said, I do this with the kids. So whenever I say whoops, I do it with them too. So they see me make mistakes. That's what drawing is all about, is making mistakes, right? So I see me here on this little island. And let's say that my environment is that I want to go from this little island over to this little island, right? But there's a big gap here, and I don't have any wings, right? And I don't have any magic shoes that can help me jump really high, right? And there's nothing in between these things here. There's no bridge for me to get from this island to this island. Okay. So I have to figure out something to do, right? That's going to be the procedure. That's the activity or the habit or the action that's performed. Okay. It's the way that you move through the board. So I would say, all right, so let's doodle ourselves jumping from one of these islands to the other island. Here's a little island. All right. There's the other little island. And here's me. Here's me jumping from one island to the other island. I'm trying to spread out my little feet so that they look like they're jumping. Now they're jumping feet, they're not standing feet, even though the whole thing is just sort of floating in midair, right? Woo. Maybe I'll do that to sort of signify that they're jumping, right? So that's the procedure. Now, they're going to be taking their time right now, and they're going to be doodling all of the things. Whoops, wrong color. They're going to be doodling all the things, and they're going to take probably between these two boxes, they'll take probably 5 or 6 or 7 minutes. And while they're doing that, I'm going to explain, and I'll say, okay, listen to me. While you're doodling, I just want you to listen. That when it comes to systems, altering your environment, you actually have the ability to alter your environment. Your procedure is going to be the thing that you do, and that procedure is going to be the same no matter what that obstacle is, okay? So your environment, just like a video game board, your environment is going to be something that you might be able to change, but you also might not be able to change. The procedure is going to be either the skill set that you have to deal with this particular thing, all right? Or it's going to be the action that you take every single time, okay? So if every single time my video game character sees that they have to leap over something, then that means that they're going to use, I'll use like the A button on my controller, and I'll hit the A button, and that means jump. That's the procedure that we do. When it comes to ADHD brains, however, what we have to understand is that this whole idea of environment versus procedure for us really affects our ability to actually get the darn thing done, whatever that big leap is. For some of us, it's just maneuvering through the board. For some of us, it's literally like, I can't get myself out of bed in the morning. How do I get myself from in the bed where it's warm and cozy, right? And I don't want to get out of the bed because I know that when I get out of the bed, my feet are going to be cold and my body is going to ache and I'm going to feel tired and all of those things, right? So how do I get myself from there to running on the street, which is what I actually want myself to do? I want to motivate myself to run on the street. Can I alter my environment in some way? Is there something that I can do, right? Oftentimes I have the ability to alter our environment. And this is especially true when they're thinking about video games. If they're thinking about a lot of the video games that they play, the majority of the video games that they play, they can alter their environment, right? So they're able, like Roblox and all of those things, they can alter their environment to help them proceed through, okay? So environment's going to be to alter the place in which you are in, your surroundings, so that they can accommodate you. And the procedure part of it is, let's say, for example, that at the very beginning of the game, your character isn't very good at leaping. Are they able to do something else? Most everyone is able to leap from one of those little islands to the other island, but for some reason, your character, maybe the class that you chose, if we're talking like D&D, maybe the class that you chose is too heavy to leap. Is there something else that you could do? Do you have something else in your backpack that you can use? Is there a different action that you can take in order to help your character leap over? So let's say, for example, that my little me person isn't very good. Like it is not able to leap from one island here, the other island here. So instead of just jumping, because if I just jump, I'm going to fall off the cliff and I'm not going to get the thing done that I need to get done. Instead of jumping, my first response when I have one of these big spaces is to actually dig in my backpack and find something else that I can use to help me accommodate myself. My first action is going to be that, right? So then we move on to the next part of it. And again, like I said, I draw these with the kids, right? So the goal here ultimately is that we talk about these things and how they're personal to them, but also how they're personal to me, so that they can also see that as an adult with ADHD, like, I recognize it. I see how you guys are maneuvering, and you can do it. Like, as a person with ADHD, you can do it. You can live in this, you can live in your world, and you can be successful and happy without burning yourself out, right? So the next part is that you're going to, procedure-wise, maybe give them a special weapon or skill. So I would say to your kids, okay, I want you to doodle your character defeating an opponent. And again, I'm going to be doing it with them. And while they're doodling, I'm going to explain to them that when it comes to defeating your opponent, maybe your first action isn't going to be, well, I'm just going to jump off a cliff and force myself to do the non-preferred task. All right, I'm just going to make myself do it, because that will work, but not always. All right, sometimes you can get yourself running fast enough so that you can actually make the leap. Sometimes you can't, right? So what is a different procedure that you could potentially do? All right, so I go back to my analogy with running. In the mornings, it's hard to get myself to run now because it is cold and my bed is warm and my cats are at my feet and I don't wanna, right? So what is my procedure? Well, on days when it is warmer, I just tell myself, get up and run for 15 minutes and then you can stop. But my brain, just like everyone's brain, is adaptable. And at some point in time, my brain goes, that's not good enough anymore, right? It's just like a video game. It gets harder and harder as you go along. It's just not good enough anymore. And so now I have to use a different procedure. I have to take a different action. So what do? I text my friends and I say, hey guys, I'm going to start running again. I want you to hold me accountable. Can we meet up and do some runs together? Can we meet up at the park at like 5 a.m. or whatever, and let's just do some trail runs? And they, it's supposed to be a full moon, like we can run in the dark and it'll be fun, right? And so then now my procedure has changed, right? So now I have a different set of both consequences as well as rewards, right? So meanwhile, while I'm explaining this to the kids, I say, okay, now add yourself a cliff, right? So you've got yourself defeating your opponent. Let's say my opponent's like a wild Malay, right? And I'm going to say, okay, so now before you just go charging headlong to try to defeat your opponent, give yourself a sword, right? And maybe also look around your environment. Is there something in your environment that you can alter? Like maybe in your environment, there's like a stone behind you. You can like pick that stone up, right? And you can throw it at the thing, whatever that monster is, okay? So for me, as far as running, it would be, I'm altering my environment. The system that I'm putting in place is going to be the system, and it doesn't matter my mood. I'm going to alter my environment. I'm literally going to put my running shoes and all of my running stuff in the middle of my floor. So the minute that I get out of bed, I'm going to stumble over them. If I'm getting up in the middle of the night to go to the bathroom, I'm still going to stumble over them. Like I don't have an excuse to be like, oh, I forgot that I was supposed to run this morning. All right. So I'm just going to put it in my environment and I'm going to sit it there. Right. And then finally, I'm also going to set up a reminder on my phone, and it's going to wake me up with the upcoming noise. Right. So that's going to affect my mood. It's going to affect my environment. It's going to affect both simultaneously. That is both procedure as well as system. So when it comes to this stuff, and the kids get really stuck on like, I want to separate which is which, it doesn't really matter, right? Using these things are more like tools. It doesn't matter if your character has a special sword that they're able to fight the villain or the obstacle with, or if they have like a special set of powers. The goal ultimately is to defeat the obstacle. The obstacle for me is I don't want to run in the mornings because it's cold, right? So I set up different systems and procedures in place to help them with that. And again, this is about them understanding their own brain. So if we put it in the mode of a video game character, now this isn't about you not being able to sit down and do your math homework while your sister is able to sit down for 2 hours and do all of her homework, but you can't seem to get it together in order to do it. It's not that defeatist mindset. This is about you getting through the board, right? And if the game board is you completing your homework, then that's great. That's the game board, right? So we talk about that. And then the next thing that I have them do, and again, they see all of these things as I open them up one by one. They can see the different little tiles and things, right? Is we talk about the fact that we have bigger opponents in games, just like we have smaller opponents in games, right? So there's like little tiny things that we have to get through in a game. There's also much bigger challenges that we have, like big boss battles is what we kind of call them, right? So for the big boss battles, what happens if you like complete that big boss battle? Maybe the big boss battle for you is sitting down and finally completing that essay that you were supposed to complete, or sitting down and like organizing your closet the way your mom told you to, like 2 weeks ago, but you've been putting it off because you don't want to, right? once you've defeated that big opponent, is the game over? Like, are you done? And the answer, of course, is no, right? It gets harder and harder each time. But just like a video game, you get more skills and you also get more stuff. You also get more, things that you put in your backpack. You get more swords, you get more, ways that you can defeat those opponents. So like a video game, like it never quite ends when it comes to doing those things and completing them. I'm 45 years old and I still am going through the same mindset of like, okay, I don't want to do this hard executive functioning thing, but I really need to do this hard executive functioning thing. And so I have a new big boss that I got to defeat. Can I alter my environment? Can I change my procedure? Let me check my skill bag. Do I have something in here that I can pull out? And it changes every single time. That's kind of the beauty and wonder of not only our life, but also our brains, is that we do have different challenges every single time. But when you are working with your own brain, that is a non-systems based brain in a systems based society, that can be really difficult. And then the last thing that we talk about is the idea of what happens at the end of the game. So, and by the end of the game, I mean, let's say that for the rest of your life, no matter how much you hate it, you are going to have to spend, 20 minutes every single day doing some sort of a mindfulness activity, whether that's you are going to go work out, or you are going to sit down and journal, or you're going to do this thing. Making yourself sit down and do that creating that habit, right? Making yourself sit down and do that isn't fun, and it's not novel, and it's not interesting. And when you have ADHD, something that you have to do every single day, whether it's brushing your teeth or sitting down and forcing yourself to exercise or write, whatever that is, that's really hard for ADHD people to do because it's boring, right? It's after you've defeated the game. I finally tricked my mind into doing this thing every single day, but now I don't want to do it anymore because it's boring. It's like when you've defeated the game. So what do? You have to add things on top of it. Just like when a game is over, you can have new challenges you can add to yourself. If you're playing a board game, people play board games all the time where they're like, okay, for this one, for Uno, we're not allowed to use any draw 4 cards. No draw 4 cards. Those go completely out, right? Or no reversals. So people will add new challenges. If you're playing a video game, it's like collect all the things that are blah, 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 or try it on a harder level or whatever it is, right? So you can make it interesting, just like with a video game, you just have to alter it. So I have them draw like some expansion packs that they might come up with, right? So, if you're going through a video game and you're saying, okay, I defeated, like, they know that I play Harry Potter, like I'm obsessed with that game. So like I defeated Harry Potter. The only expansion packs that have come out lately are like stuff packs. And so they're not really interesting, right? And so instead, I have to alter my procedure. I have to change the way that I play the game because it's still the same game, right? I have to change the way that I play the game to put it on a harder challenge. I have to say, okay, I'm going to play the game, but I'm not going to allow myself to use any of these spells, right? They're cursed spells that you're not supposed to use. I'm not going to allow myself to use any of these spells. So now I've altered the procedure, right? Or maybe I alter the environment. Maybe I grab some of those stuff packs and I put them in different places. Maybe I change my whole room of requirement, whatever it is. You alter your environment and you make things different and new and interesting again. And that's what you have to do. So anyway, that's what I do in my sketchnoting classes. It's not always like related to video games, but that's definitely one of the things that kind of pulls the kids in is we draw together and we talk about their brains and we talk about the ways that our brains interact in the world. And I realized that I had never really explained what I do in my classes. Like I kind of like go do an overview, but I thought this might be a better way for people to kind of understand like, this is what we do in my class. And I think that's why the kids really like it, is that they're able to see that like, this is something that is not just a big list of like tips and organizational tricks. Because like I tell them all the time, like you can get that anywhere. With me, it's us walking through this together. Like we are in this video game together. And I see you and I recognize your challenges and you're not alone and you will be successful. So that's what I do.